Getting involved in a war against Iran is the worst thing we can do. Far worse than what we did in 2003. Don't get into this. The best thing the United States can do is to take this 2-week period as a reprieve and not launch one airstrike, because it almost certainly would not succeed to take out their nuclear facilities.
I want to emphasize that it is probably too late for air power alone to do the job. And you're seeing that Israel already knows it can't do the job alone. But even with America, there's a big problem. And the big problem is the size of the nuclear stockpile of enriched material that Iran has. Even if America can destroy 90% of that enriched material, that would still leave enough for at least one nuclear bomb. And the idea that any air power, any airstrike can guarantee 100%, I don't think so. And I think Donald Trump knows that's not true either. And that's what's going on here.
So I think that could be one of the reasons why Trump kind of out of nowhere, after having sent a Truth Social post 2 or 3 days ago of unconditional surrender, like he was going to give the Iranians the only option of either surrender or die, basically. Then all of a sudden did an about face, and instead of starting a bombing campaign by the United States, and as we've told you, there's been a profound amount of military capacity, both in the air and on the sea, being sent to the region. There are 3 aircraft carrier strike groups either there or on the way there. There is tons of air capacity, dozens of aerial refueling tankers that have gone there, huge numbers of C-17s, C-5 Globemasters, just stuffed full of all kinds of military capacity. Lots of things moving around on the air and on the sea, really on multiple sides of this issue here, all in range of Iran. So it looked like that Trump was ready to do something. All of a sudden, you saw while we were actually on the air, I guess it was yesterday, that Trump said, you know what, how's about a couple of weeks? Maybe we should just give diplomacy one more chance. Now, what we don't know right now, and we're going to continue to monitor this and watch the information very closely, watch for any clues, any movement of troops, etc. But it's unclear right now if Trump made this decision because he realizes, oh, snap, we can't just compel a military victory. Iran is too big of a power, and we don't have enough military force, especially offensive missiles, where they're airstrikes or ground-to-ground missiles, to compel coercion from the Iranian side. So we better come up with something different. And he may also have been briefed that these GBU-57 big bunker busters, the penetration, the ones that can go 30,000 pound, ones that are allegedly can go down to about 200 feet, even that might not work, probably wouldn't work, according to Ted Postal we had on the show. Definitely go watch that video if you haven't, to find out exactly why we're talking about. But he may have concluded that all I'm going to end up doing by attempting to do something that probably will fail is to put a target on our backs, possibly our ships in Bahrain, our air bases in Qatar, certainly our bases in Iraq and in Syria and in Jordan and several other places, Saudi Arabia, etc. All would be putting all that at risk for something that probably wouldn't work. So, hey, how's about some diplomacy? I hope that's the case, as opposed to, I just needed a little more time to build up more combat power, and has not yet come to the realization that the missile strikes are not going to result in the submission and the subjugation of Iran. Hopefully, it's not that one, because we'll be in a bit of a problem if that is. The other thing that everybody does need to know, and certainly the president, I hope he's tracking on this, is that Israel is having a lot more damage done to it than many in the West realize. There has been an active move inside of Israel to suppress images of the destruction and the damage done inside of Israel. Some's coming out, but a lot of it is there's actively being suppressed. And it's really taken a lot of people by surprise. There's just some of the scenes you're seeing right there. But there was, and on the 16th, on June 16th, there was some reports that came out that there was a research facility that had been hit. And this is something that was a real big problem here, because there was lots of research that Israel had done, and it was a major facility that got hit. Gary, if you could put that first full screen up there. that would be great. Yeah, one of Israel's prestigious institutes suffers heavy damage in Iranian attack. That is on the 16th. Then on the 19th, there was another report come out. It said Israel is left with no refining operating, surging fuel deficit after Iranian strike. So Iran, just like we saw this, you may recall that big, massive video of the refinery inside Tehran that was struck. I think it was the second day of the war, just massive fire. That's going in both directions. So now Iran is also taking under fire the Israeli side, which puts all of their operations at risk. If you don't have enough fuel, you can't even keep your tanks going in Syria, where they have still some vehicles, possibly into Lebanon if they want to go into there, and definitely not in the Gaza Strip. And that's on top of course, all of the civilians that are just having regular vehicles. If you lose the ability to process and make enough fuel, you're going to be in a real fuel deficit, and then you're going to have to start deciding where you're going to run things and what you're going to operate and what you're not. It could potentially have to put a refinement under constraints where you can only buy so much gasoline, etc. Then on the let's see, on the 20th, that's today, there was today there was this another Iranian strike decimates an Israeli science institute. And listen, this is a direct retaliation. You see what Israel has hit in Iran. Iran is hitting in Israel. So Israel started off and they assassinated a lot of nuclear scientists and other scientists in the Iranian regime. And now the Iranians are hitting Israeli situation here. And you can see part of that picture right there where a big science institute was hit. And they were interviewing some of the scientists, and they were just devastated by this because of a lot of the research that had been lost, and permanently lost, because it was all the facilities were destroyed, the computers, the files, etc., setting them back. So Israel is hurting. And, it's just ironic that despite again, those are open source. You see, I mean, I'm pulling stuff from the 16th, the 19th, and today. This news is out there for anyone willing to just look. But instead, the narrative coming out of the so-called elite class in Washington just continues to operate on the narrative. You may recall some number of months ago, one of our guests really was talking about the Russia-Ukraine war, but put it so good. He said that the Western side was operating and making decisions based on a narrative, whereas the Russians were taking operations and making policies based on reality. And that disparity between the two was resulting in the Western side with Ukraine losing. That same thing is continuing to go on here. In light of what I just told you about how Israel is really taking some body blows from Iranian missiles, here's what Newt Gingrich says about this situation, how he views it.
When historians look back and say, did Donald Trump really make a difference? Think about this. The original Ayatollah Khomeini first started calling us the Great Satan in 1978. Iranian mobs began chanting death to America in 1979 when they seized illegally the American embassy. They have been taunting us, attacking us, harassing us all these years through all these presidents. And finally, they have collided with Donald J. Trump, and he's crossed the line. He and Netanyahu are partners, much like Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were partners, and the two of them are going to change history.
Yeah, see, because to him it's easy. We are going to go in there and we are going to pummel them, and we're going to destroy their nuclear weapons making capacity, and we're going to reorient the entire Middle East. That's what we said in 2003, by the way, with that regime change operation to get Saddam Hussein out. Remember, we were going to completely reorient the Middle East, and it was going to be this new American Western friendly place. There wasn't going to be any more conflict because everybody was going to be in love with America and in love with democracy and all that kind of stuff. How'd that work out for you? We know for sure how that worked out. It was terrible. We took what was a bulwark against Iran, by the way, and then turned it into a now Iranian friendly place. We got rid of after 13 years, and God only knows how many people were killed and how many tens of billions of dollars were squandered trying to bring that regime change to an end. Finally did succeed. Bashar al-Assad left, and who do we put in charge but somebody that used to be part of al-Nusra, used to be part of ISIS, etc. And oh, sure, he put on a suit and cleaned up his beard, but it's the same guy that was, by some accounts, actually committing physical atrocities and killing people, etc. There has definitely been a lot of pogroms already done as they've kind of tried to consolidate power, and they've killed a lot of their opponents. So that's already happening there. We don't know how that's going to work out here, but people generally don't change who they really are, whatever kind of clothes they wear. So we'll see how that's going to play out. But now then, aside from all of that, he's still talking the same thing here. We're going to reorient the Middle East, and we're going to win. Even though you see Israel has embarked on, what are we on, day 8, I think, of this? They're 19 months into the war in Hamas, against Hamas, and they still haven't won. And in fact, the number of Hamas fighters, according to Israel, is something close to what it was at the beginning, i.e., as we've warned from the very beginning, that since this channel existed, that Israel had pursued a military course to try to obtain a political outcome of security for its people that will fail. And we showed you very tangibly why it would fail, and it's playing out exactly that way. Nothing brilliant on my part. I read. I just observe, and I see what happens. And I understand how human behavior works when you're trying to compel people to do things, etc. It's not hard. You got centuries of examples to go by. It's playing out like it always does. It's not hard to figure out. We just don't want to, because that's not our narrative. So we're continuing to go down this path. Well, it's not just Newt Gingrich. If it was just one off, that's one thing. But now here's another retired 4-star general, Wes Clark, who wrote in the Wall Street Journal. He has this great idea to how we can have a negotiated settlement. We don't have to win this by war. Newt Gingrich was talking about that, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are going to kind of go in there and be war heroes like Reagan and Thatcher and overturn everything, blah, blah, blah. Well, at least Wes Clark is saying, give diplomacy a chance with Iran. But what kind of diplomacy does he come up with? He writes that, quote, Mr. Trump, however, has the leverage to achieve a 2-track approach, a diplomatic solution that would defang the regime. Mr. Trump could require Iran to stop all nuclear efforts and give up uranium enrichment permanently, renounce its aims to destroy Israel and the U.S., and end its hegemonic aspirations and cease supporting terrorism. In return, the U.S. wouldn't destroy it. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? You call that a diplomacy? Look, that's what a parent says to a child, basically. Do what I say, or I'm going to ground you, or you're going to get a spanking, something like that. Because I'm the parent, you're the kid, I'll just tell you what. And for him to say that Trump, Gary, can you put that back up there again for a second? For him to say that Trump could require Iran to stop all its nuclear efforts and give up its enrichment. Dude, have you not been paying attention? Iran said that's their red line. They won't do that. We don't have the authority to compel them to do that. We cannot say the non-proliferation treaty, the nuclear treaty that governs most nations of the world, which we're signatories to, which Iran is a signatory to, they have the authorization to have low levels of nuclear reprocessing. So you can't tell them no, even though you say, yeah, but you could use it someday to develop a bomb. We don't want you to have that capacity even. Fair enough, that's your preference, but that's not the reality, because they do have the legal right to do so, and you can't compel them to not do that, legally anyway. More than just technically, though, we don't have the capacity. We can't just compel and force them to do so, because that would mean flat out going to war against Iran. And I don't mean just having some airstrikes. I mean, you'd have to go to war with Iran, invade the country like you did with Iraq, and roll into Tehran, take over the country, impose whatever rules you want, insert whatever country government you want, assuming that you could kill enough Iranians, etc. Well, obviously, we don't have the military for that. We can't launch any kind of a ground incursion in Iran. That would be absurd. What is it? Iran, I think, is like 2 or 3 times bigger than Iraq was. And you know how big Iraq was. It was huge. I served there. I fought one war in Kuwait, actually, in the southern part of Iraq. And then I was deployed there once during the Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2009. Did a lot of driving around in combat vehicles and patrols, whatever. I know how big that place is. And if Iran is substantially larger and their military spread out a lot further, and it's a much more capable military force than Iraq had, than we had. You're not going to do it. So like Robert Pape said, it's too late. You're not going to bomb somebody into oblivion. You're certainly not going to launch a few airstrikes and the country's going to be military defeated when they have the capacity to strike back at you and hurt you bad. And just like the Iranians can strike back and hit the Israelis, they can also strike back and hit Americans. We have all these troops in there that are points of vulnerability, that are just pawns on a chessboard, because we cannot keep them safe. If we get into a fight with Iran and Iran strikes at these any of those bases you see on the air with Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, etc., Oman, all those different places, UAE, just ducks in a barrel. The same way that Ted Postal showed you, where scores of ballistic missiles went through the entire integrated air defense system of the Israeli side and hit their targets. The same thing would happen to us as well. And they could knock out our Navy. Who knows? They could sink some of our ships, or at least cause damage, hit our airfields in Qatar, our bases, the army bases in Iraq, etc. All of those things would be just as vulnerable. And we would have casualties for no gain to our country, because you're not going to go in to fight a war. It's just going to cause a bunch of casualties. That's what's going to happen if we go forward with this.